Sarah and I have an old camper trailer from the 70s, and we used it lots when the girls were little, but for the last few years it's just sat in our backyard kind of being a storage shed. And so it was kind of getting to the point where we either had to knock the top off of it and I was going to turn it into a utility trailer, or we had to do some renovations to make it usable again. And so, with nothing better to do due to the pandemic, we decided we would renovate it. And so we went in one day and we started ripping things out. We took out the sink, we took out the stove, we took out the oven, we took out the fridge, we knocked off the countertops, and we kind of gutted the thing to give it a refresh and to make it better again. So one Friday we were cutting countertops in the garage, and it was such a beautiful day out that I had both drive-in doors open and our walk-in door open, and we were going back and forth between the camper and back to the garage cutting things and doing whatever. And one time I went back to the garage and I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, and I looked, and here there was a bird in the garage. And it was flying around trying to find its way out, but it couldn't figure it out. It kept flying up and hitting the ceiling, and then it would go over and whack into a wall, and it would spin around here and fly over there, and it just couldn't find its way out. So I thought, well, that's no big deal. I'll just leave the doors open and eventually it'll go. But an hour later, it was still banging into the ceiling, wandering around, couldn't figure out how to get out. And so we started chasing it. Sarah got a great big board and I got another one, and we started trying to herd this thing toward the wide open drive-in doors, but it just wouldn't go. It just kept being scared of us. In fact, every time we got near it, it just flew away. Not only did it fly away, I think we were actually stressing the thing out. It actually began to fly slower from place to place. You could see it physically getting tired, and the more we tried to herd it toward the door, the more stressed it got, and the more slowly it flew, and I'm sure it was a horrible experience for this bird, right? Eventually I grabbed a fishing net and I snuck up behind it, and as it was flying along, I caught it in the fishing net and carried it outside, and it was just laying there. It wouldn't even move. I'm sure it thought the end of the world had come, and when I got outside I tipped the fishing net over and it fell down and flew away. Now, from the perspective of that bird, us chasing it around the garage was a bad thing. Right? It obviously thought we were trying to harm it. But in reality, we were trying to do something good for it. The bird obviously saw us as a threat, but we were actually its salvation. That little story reminds me that sometimes I don't have enough information to make a good judgment about what's going on. Things that look bad to me now may not actually be bad. Things that look threatening to me now may actually turn out for my good. That's certainly the story of the Bible. Lots of people realize that as time goes on in the story of Scripture. One of those, of course, is Joseph. Joseph has this terrible life where all kinds of bad things happen to him, but in the end, he's in a place of power and in a place where he can serve people, and he's in a place where he can do something that he never would have been in had those bad things not happened. And his summary of his whole life, when he talks to his brothers, who were the cause of most of his trouble, he says, don't worry about it. He says in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, he says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. You thought you were hurting me. You were trying to be mean to me, but guess what? God used it for something good. It looked like a threat. It looked really bad, but God has used it well. That may remind you of a passage in the New Testament, Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Lots of people argue about what this means, but on the very surface of it, it's clear. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things, underline all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. In all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called by him. Again, there's lots of debate about how you apply that, but the very simple first application is that God can use anything for our good. If we just look to him and try and serve him, and if we still trust and hope, anything can be used for our good. So that makes me think right now. Maybe you're in a situation where you feel like that bird trapped in my garage. Maybe you feel like there's no way out of the situation you're in. And in fact, not only is there no way out, things seem to be getting worse all the time. You're getting chased around even more. Is it possible that the thing that's causing you the most stress right now might be for your good? Again, I'm not trying to minimize anyone's pain. I'm not trying to say, oh well, everything will be fine, and glibly just go on. But I do realize, and I know from my own experience, sometimes the things that look bad actually ended up being good. The thing you intended to harm me with, God used for good. God can always work for good in our lives if we will let him. Will you let him today?